requirements of lockable enclosed area and beyond public view. The Arizona Department of Health Services is the party responsible for adopting rules to regulate marijuana, including the licensing of retail stores, cultivation facilities, and production facilities. This same state department is required to first accept license applications from existing nonprofit medical marijuana dispensaries, of which we have one in town. And then also the potential for marijuana businesses within counties that have 1 or 0 nonprofit dispensaries. So as they roll this out, there's certain guidelines they're using when they look at issuing licenses. The proposition also has a social equity ownership program, which is designed to issue licenses to entities whose owners are from communities disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws. I'm not exactly sure what that particularly means, but it may be that there are communities where there are no medical dispensaries available or licensed. That social equity ownership program, there'll be 26 additional marijuana establishment licenses issued, and my understanding is that'll happen sometime in the fall. The guidelines for that have not yet been established by the Department of Health and Human Services. Proposition 207 also placed a 16% tax on marijuana sales that is in addition to the existing transaction privilege tax and the use tax. And the revenue from that tax is divided between these different areas, community college districts, municipal police, sheriff and fire departments, districts, a state highway user revenue fund, and a new justice reinvestment fund. Also, Proposition 207 allows anyone convicted of certain marijuana-related crimes related to possession, consumption, cultivation, and transportation that they can petition for the expungement of their criminal record. So it's basically decriminalizing those that have been perhaps sent to jail or whatever the case for possession or consumption or cultivation. So the ballot initiative provided local governments with the power to ban marijuana facilities and testing centers, and also gives local control over elements of regulation, zoning, and licensing. I'm going the right way. The Department of Health Services may issue 1 marijuana establishment license per county that contains 1 registered nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary. That would be our situation. And the entity licensed by the Department of Health Services may operate all of the following. And I'm going to go through these and then I'm going to come back to them again. So, and that'll be part of our ending discussion. So you can have a marijuana establishment, and marijuana establishment is defined as a single retail location where you can have marijuana and marijuana products can be sold, marijuana can be cultivated, and marijuana products can be manufactured. A marijuana establishment also includes a single off-site cultivation location where marijuana can be grown, processed, and products can be manufactured. And thirdly, you can have a single off-site location where you can manufacture marijuana products, package marijuana products, and store marijuana and marijuana products. Note these last 2, there's no sale to consumers at these off-site locations. Then there's a category of the marijuana testing facility, and that will be overseen by the Arizona Department of Health Services or other entity. I'm not sure the details of that have been fleshed out at this point in time. So options that you have as a council is to limit the use of land for marijuana establishments and marijuana testing facilities to certain areas. You can prohibit marijuana establishments or marijuana testing facilities or both. You can regulate the time, place, and manner of these establishments and testing facilities. And also, you cannot enact restrictions that are more restrictive than those already in place for medical marijuana, and I'll go over what those are. So, the city already allows medical marijuana dispensaries. They're allowed in the C2 Highway Commercial District. Off-site cultivation is allowed in the light industrial district and the heavy industrial district. We don't have any zones in the city that are heavy industrial. We just have light industrial. And you have maps, zoning maps on the dais with you that show, I know it's small given the size, but it shows you the C2 district and the light industrial district. The C2 district is in orange, and the light industrial tends to be, I think it's a kind of a pinkish color, pinkish purple color. Currently, we have some separation requirements for medical dispensaries. They include 250 feet from any residential zone property, 250 feet from any other marijuana medical dispensary or off-site cultivation, 1,000 feet from a residential substance abuse diagnostic and treatment facility or other residential drug or alcohol rehab facility, 500 feet from a public-private parochial charter, dramatic, dancing, music, learning center, or other similar school or education facility that caters to children, 250 feet from a child care center, 250 feet from a public library or public park, 250 feet from a church, and 250 feet from a facility devoted to family recreation or entertainment. The last one would be something like a movie theater. So it's not a public park, but it could be a private movie theater. So that's our current code distancing requirements that we have for medical dispensaries. You cannot be more restrictive than this. So let's say if you want to allow adult use marijuana dispensary, you can put these type of restrictions in, but they can't be more restrictive than what you already have on the books. And again, you have a zoning map on the dais with you. So I'm going to go back again. Here's the options, and then so you can limit the use of land, basically where you're going to have these. You can prohibit both the marijuana establishments, testing facilities, or both. You can regulate where they are. And again, as I mentioned, you cannot enact restrictions that are more restricted than those already in place for medical marijuana dispensary. So for your consideration tonight, if you want to allow adult use, staff is looking for some direction in what specifically you may want to do, or if you don't want to allow it at all. So you could stipulate that you would allow, I'll give an example, let's say you allow a retail location only for marijuana and marijuana products which can be sold to consumers. It doesn't have to include the cultivation or the manufacture. You can have an off-site location where marijuana is grown, where it can be processed, and where products can be manufactured. And the testing facility, be another slide in there. The testing facility, again, is overseen by the Department of Health. So you have all of that as part of your packet, the 2 pages that I gave to you ahead of time. And staff is just looking for some direction from council. So you may want to refer to that page 1 of the memo, because that lists those basically the 4 items where you can advise staff on which direction you want to go.
Okay.
Also, if you wish to hear from somebody from the public,
Sure.
now might be a good time for that.
Mrs. Fisher, would you like to speak now? Would you please state your full name and your address, please? Thank you. And then there is a time limit. Is there?
Good evening, Pele Fisher with Peacock Legal. My office address is 4602 East Thomas Road, Phoenix, Arizona 85018. I'm here tonight on behalf of Divine Holdings and other entities related to Divine Holdings, but really as an educational standpoint. Susan, right? Susan explained how there's going to be an application process for counties that have 2 or few licenses. So this is a little bit of an ancillary issue, but also an issue that the city's going to probably be presented with because you're in this zone that provides for an expedited application process to backfill some of these county licenses where probably They originally got a license and moved to probably Maricopa or Pima County, most likely. And so the city is going to see applications come in, and part of that application process requires sign-off from the local jurisdiction saying that the proposed location is within the required zoning requirements. DHS is finalizing the rules right now. There's a draft set of rules that is up on their website. The application timeframe starts January 19th and goes through March 9th. So we expect those final rules to be finalized at least by the end of the week. But the city is going to be, I'm sure, is going to be presented with this form to sign off on the local zoning requirements of the proposed location if someone's trying to apply within this jurisdiction, and really want to serve as a resource or help educate in any way really what that sign-off is. And that sign-off is really that it's just in the right zone. It's not saying that it has met all the uses to get their conditional use permit. It's not saying that it's, has this C of O or that it's met all the requirements. It's really talking about if the proposed location is in the right zoning area. And the form there's a form up on DHS's website. I'm pretty sure it will be the final form. They haven't indicated that they're going to make any changes. And that form gives you 4 options to sign off: that there's no local zoning restriction for the proposed location, that the location, that's 1. 2, that the location's in compliance with local zoning restriction. 3, it's in compliance to where a marijuana establishment may be located, but it's subject to additional local zoning ordinances such as permit, variance, or other requirements necessary for it to open and operate. And 4, just that the proposed location is not in compliance. I've done a lot of work on Prop 207 and the rules and regulations with the Department of Health Services. Happy to help, but I want to preview this issue as you guys are talking about looking at zoning going forward, because this application process is going to probably predate any final zoning ordinances you guys make. And so want to make sure when you start seeing these forms come in that you understand what's happening, and if I can be of help or assistance in any way, I'm happy to.
Okay. Thank you. So, I just wanted for, Safford was 53% was not in favor of this, 47% was in favor. Thatcher was 69-31. Graham County was 57-42. It is a legal substance. The voters voted on it and made it a legal substance. I think that we would be wrong to ban a legal substance sell in the city limits. But I can tell you that I don't want to see marijuana cultivated in the city limits. I don't want to see it manufactured in the city limits. We watched the county just go through their little thing out there in Bonita, where they shut that down. And I didn't follow the whole legits and stuff, but my other question, Susan, to you is that 16% tax on the existing tax. So Safford's what, 2.5%? What do we get? 2.5, and that 16% don't even go to us. That goes back to the state. So all we get out of that sale of the marijuana is 2.5%. And I believe that it'll only be a straight cash basis, correct? You cannot use a debit card. So there's really going to be a hard wait. If it was an honest system in this world today, once again, cash sales are easy to manipulate versus, transactions where you actually have a bank involved. So I don't know, Mike, that's my question. Do you think it's going to be a cash base? I know that.
I find that highly unlikely.
Mayor, I'll just jump in. I'm not 100% sure of this, but my understanding is regular banks that are FDIC, federally insured, cannot be used, so you wouldn't be able to use a debit card from your bank. or other types of payments from your bank, because still according to the feds, marijuana is illegal and is classified. So my understanding is that it is a cash-based business.
Across the board?
That's my
Yeah.
understanding.
Florida.
And that may be a question for our city
I-
attorney or.
I do
Yeah,
believe,
for the
I
person that
do
just
believe
spoke.
that our dispensary here is cash basis.
I'm happy to help if you want me to.
Sure, go ahead and answer my question for me.
Yeah, there are several banks in Arizona that are banking within the dispensary industry, but there are some restrictions. There's been several movements to get through Congress in the Safe Banking Act, but the banks that are banking in the industry have huge barriers to entry, regulations, requirements. DOR also has been part of the process, working closely with the regulator and the dispensaries to ensure everything is compliant and that taxes are coming in accordingly. So while there are some barriers in the traditional banking, those have been overcome in other areas of highly regulations and inventory control from the state to ensure everything adds up, even though there are a lot of cash transactions.
Okay. I know, also, council, I know that after I spoke with the mayor of Pima, and they, as you guys all were, they shut it down. And then Mayor of Pima, or Mayor of Thatcher, they have tabled it. They had their discussion last year, and they chose to table it, and he looked at me at lunch and said it's because they wanted to see what we were gonna do. Of course. And so, you know, this is my take. My personal take is, you know what, if somebody wants to open up a shop here to sell it, let's sell it, it's legal. Smoking's legal, and tobacco, I believe, kills more people. Drinking, alcohol, it's legal. I think that kills more people. I think that we should allow the sale of a legal substance here. That's just mine. But saying that, I do think because we have so much farmland that is really close to housing, and marijuana does have a smell, I think that cultivating and growing should be out of the picture.
It can be in the county, but not.
Not in Safford limits.
I'm with you on what you said.
Councilman McGoy?
I have a couple of questions as far as, I understand we're gonna get, Graham County's gonna get one more license, correct? Is that all?
That's my
Through the
understanding.
lottery system?
That's my understanding. I'm not 100% sure, but as I read through this, 23-page document, it looks like probably Graham County would get one more license.
And my understanding is that Thatcher and Pima don't want that there. And the county does not really want to have to come up with rules for a dispensary. We know we're gonna have to deal with grows at some point. But we're telling everybody when they call us, we tell them, find something inside the city of Safford. They already have rules for that, for a dispensary. What I would like to know is, does medical and does recreational have the same standard for a dispensary? Or if not, could we require that a recreational have to come up to the same standard as a medical dispensary?
I'm not 100% sure how to answer that, so.
I think she's probably got an answer.
I'm happy to help.
Mrs. Fisher, are you an attorney?
I am.
Uh-oh, okay, I just want to make sure I understood that. No, I'm just kidding.
The Department of Health Services right now is putting in all the rules and regulations for how the adult use marijuana establishment licenses will operate under. They are looking very similar to the existing requirements for the medical marijuana dispensaries, so it's very related. But when it comes to zoning, you have some local jurisdiction over the zoning that you want to do, so long as it's not more restrictive than the current zoning that you have for your medical marijuana dispensaries.
Do we allow growing medical marijuana in the city limits?
I believe in your light commercial districts, I have the zone, but do you want to answer that?
Really?
I have the zoning.
Yeah, in the light industrial district, which there are not many properties in the city that are zoned that, we do allow cultivation currently under the medical marijuana.
We
So
do
it's
allow it.
off-site cultivation, yes.
Do we require it to be in a standard greenhouse of some sort, or do we just allow it?
That may be governed by the state as far as if you have off-site cultivation, exactly how it's set up. I think it is for adult use. I haven't looked back at the medical use cultivation to see what those requirements are.
Susan, do we know if the medical dispensary, the current dispensary, do they cultivate in the area?
I'm not aware of it. You were pointing to somebody, I
No.
thought, but.
No, I don't know.
Not in the city
I didn't think they
limits.
did.
We
I
have
thought
no,
they
we have
just-
no cultivation in the city
Right,
limits.
so they're not taking advantage of that. that
As far as I
zoning.
know, but they're getting their product from somewhere, I just
Right,
don't know where.
Right. And with this, on the cultivating at home, with out of sight, and we're not impacting that at all, are we? Or we can't impact that, correct?
That's my understanding of how the law reads.
Right.
That basically it does give citizens the ability to grow in their own home under certain conditions, 12 plants maximum
Right.
per adult that's 21 years or older. So you could have 2 adults and you could potentially have 12 plants,
Right.
or if you had
And we
3
can't-
adults.
We can't impact that,
It does, I don't think so.
right? Just maybe what days it can be sold, times, places.
Well, and if you're cultivating at home, you can't sell it. That's the other thing.
Correct.
Right. It's for your own personal use, my understanding.
So, since we allow it under the medical use, we can't make a rule for, adult use, recreational, correct? Is that what you're saying?
So if you look at all these distance and separation requirements that we have, you know, the 250 feet and the 1,000 feet, and then the next page, we can't, if we're gonna allow sale, we can't make these more restrictive.
Okay, but
We can follow these, but we can't make
I'm
them more
asking for the
restrictive.
cultivation though. Can we limit the cultivation, or can we get rid of cultivating it and manufacturing it, meaning like growing it? Can we take that off the table
Might.
under the C2? Right, because right now, the medical sales can only be in a C2, right?
Correct.
And so therefore, and I just looked and I've highlighted a lot of C2s. So in our medical right now, we can cultivate it under a C2 as well, correct?
No,
No.
only in the industrial.
Only in the light industrial.
industrial
And that's the
district.
C3, and there's only like 3 spots, and it's really around the hospital.
It's not
It gets up
C3,
there on
but
the
it's
industrial
just,
loop.
it's kind of a purple
Hey,
color.
tax them. I got property.
I'll tell you, around Entertainment Avenue, and that upper right-hand side,
So which one is, oh, the light industrial, it's the
Yeah.
purplish color.
yeah, so we're talking about
The light
up
purple.
here.
Oh, so there is, it's right by my house.
There's just a few places, yes, right by, yes, that's over in that location too.
I
It's
would
hard to
like to,
see
yeah.
on this map, the faded colors, but there's not many light industrial locations.
So that's the only place that it can be grown today,
Correct,
under the medical.
correct.
And so, I'm trying to follow you, Susan. So if we can't add anything else to it. So if we say that we accept this, marijuana can only be cultivated for recreational use in the light industrial, which is just those few little areas.
Medical,
No,
yes.
I'm sorry.
Adult use.
Recreational adult use can only be cultivated in the light industrial. Or can I make that recommendation to staff to bring it back to us that we do not even allow it to be cultivated or manufactured?
That's something I would have to talk to our city attorney about it, because as I question about, I think it's only medical establishments. It's a question for the city attorney. if we can be more, that would be more restrictive if we
The
don't
thing-
allow it.
Council, the thing that I think that we can sell it, that's just me. But I think we should be really cautious on the cultivating, and because, I mean, I think that a company can come in and start growing this stuff, and it's like, go ahead.
Well, I think this establishment, or whatever the definition was, has to be licensed, and there's only one more coming, is that correct? Or is there gonna be multiplicities of these things?
My understanding is only one more, potentially.
So we
That's what
can-
I'm not sure is if it's just one more license for either a dispensary or a grow, or,
Yeah, in this expedited licensing process to quote-unquote backfill some of the county licenses, it will be, if there's one dispensary here, it will only be one more, so basically giving counties 2 licenses total. Other than that, we go to a statewide ratio, which is 1 license per every pharmacy in the state. With these backfill of licenses and the social equity licenses, there's not gonna be additional new licenses for a while.
So, Mrs. Fisher, are you understanding when I say I can make a rule that we limit for this new dispensary to come in that they cannot cultivate? Or would you say no, because you allow it under the medical facility, that you have to allow it for the recreational facility?
Prop 207, talks about that it can't be more restrictive than your current zoning requirements. I will tell you anecdotally, I think that the main thrust is, the retail locations, but cultivation will probably come further down the road, but that's kind of the hot commodity.
Okay, Councilman Seal?
I just had a question for Susan. I was just curious. I remember when we passed the restrictions for the medical, but I don't remember us ever talking about cultivation at that time. How long's that, the cultivation been in?
I think it was part of what the council did in 2011. Discussed in 2010, 2011. I think it became effective in 2011, and cultivation was part of that.
Yeah, I don't remember. Who was on the council when we talked about this?
I don't remember it either.
The only thing I remember is that you could not keep a dispensary from coming in to your city. There was one per county, but you couldn't keep them from coming into the city. You could, however, put restrictions in place to protect yourself, because if you didn't do that, then they could move in anywhere they wanted to. And so we put the restrictions in as far as where the facility could be located, but I certainly don't remember at that time that cultivation was even discussed.
No,
Was it?
who thought about it then?
It's specifically spelled out in the zoning ordinance, the cultivation component.
I don't foresee it becoming a problem, just because there's too much out in the middle of nowhere land, way cheaper to do a facility like that as far as cultivation. I think all we're gonna see is one more dispensary in the next, who knows, I mean, I know in the talks about, the Eurofresh, or can't think of their name, but they had no intention of even growing more than 10% their first year, because they said, we will flood the market. Everybody's gonna jump in and it's gonna flood the market. So until they get everybody, all of you guys used to smoking this stuff, they can't even, they don't even need any more grows. So that's a legitimate thing, is if the market gets flooded, you're not gonna see more people asking to grow here. So
And
I think that one dispensary is all we're gonna see, at least in the next,
And I don't,
Quite a few years.
I think they're gonna sign up as fast as they can to get in here.
oh, if we already have this and we can't make it any more restrictive, we're
Right,
we're wasting our time.
But maybe you we'll have to look into it, but maybe you can amend the current code to limit it both for medical And then when you pass the adult use,
Yeah.
now they're in keeping with one another. I don't think they can keep you, and again, we'll check with the attorney, but I don't see how they would be able to keep you from amending your existing code if you decide that now this is opened up, and as part of knowing this new information, that there's opportunities for more to come in, that you would then restrict it under medical, and therefore it would be able to be restricted under recreational.
Yeah.
If there's a difference between medical and recreational, the facility itself, as far as its cleanliness or whatever, I'd like to see us elevate to the highest.
I think the difference is the THC or whatever, if I'm saying it right. Like, I think medical is gonna be like, the best of the best, and then the recreational use is gonna be like one under that, if that even makes sense. I don't know.
But if
I'm
the-
sure I could ask somebody out in the audience, they'd be able to tell me.
If the medical has a higher standard of dispensing, I think we ought to opt to that. Maybe that's not a real thing, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd have to do a side-by-side comparison of the state statutes to see the specific requirements and how they line out. The other thing I want to point out is that this is also part of a text amendment to our zoning ordinance, which has its own public hearing process that we would have to go through. There's advertising that needs to be done. It has to go before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then before the City Council, and then a first read and a second read on the ordinance to make the changes. So one of the things that's happening now in all the phone calls that I'm receiving is people are trying to get their applications in this first round, but this actually, the changes, if you guide us to do the changes will not take effect until after the March 9th deadline date for the first round of applications.
Okay. Mrs. Fisher, can you clarify my THC report, or did I fail?
No, you were on the right track. But I will say, when it comes to the cleanliness requirements, sanitation requirements, security requirements, the draft rules that are out from DHS right now look very similar to the medical rules. So I think that they will be both of high standards for security, cleanliness, and that. Really, what you're talking about, the difference comes in of what products can be sold and how much products can be sold. The
Okay.
medical program allows for a patient to have up to 2.5 ounces. The adult use only allows for 1 ounce and does limit the amount of THC or servings that can be produced.
Said something about 16 more. 16 more what is coming?
Sixteen more licenses.
16 more licenses? and
Well, that's
seven-
in the social equity program, so, you have this first round of applications. People will put in an application, my understanding is they'll put in an application, and then there'll be a lottery.
26.
So then there'll be a lottery. This is this first round, the applications start, I think it's January 19th, and then March 9th. That's the first round. The second round, I understand, and this is, I'm hearing this anecdotal information from different people I'm talking to, the second round will be 26 licenses issued under the social equity ownership program. I also want to point out that you can have a dual-use facility. So you can have a medical marijuana dispensary and also an adult-use dispensary in the same location, which may be something that our existing medical marijuana dispensary is considering. But right now, the applications would be incomplete because I can't sign off on the application saying it's an allowed use in a given zone, because we don't have it in a given zone.
So Susan, the applications come to you?
A zoning, it's basically a zoning verification application
Oh, so
comes to me. And
yeah.
that's verifying that at a given address, it meets the zoning requirements. So I just approved recently a residential, a property for medical marijuana, a second medical marijuana dispensary, even though I don't think they're giving any more licenses for that, because it met all that 250 feet from whatever and 1,000 feet from whatever. And that's part of their application submittal, is they're getting this kind of zoning clearance
Right.
from the jurisdiction that given this particular address, it meets the zoning requirements in the jurisdiction's code.
I guess what I wonder is, if somebody goes through the application process, will they be assigned to our jurisdiction, or?
They go to a lottery.
Yeah,
Everybody
mine-
wants
yeah.
a
But we
license.
don't have any choice in the.
No.
Right, that
So
would,
it's all through the state.
yeah, that would have been the better question.
Yes, and I've heard, again, it's, you know, that there's a $25,000 non-refundable application fee
Dang.
as part of it also. That's something, I don't know it for 100%, but it's just what I've heard. So I've been getting a lot of phone calls, I think, of people looking around, trying to figure out, does it make sense for them to put an application in for a particular jurisdiction, because they're spending that money and they're not getting it back. And then it becomes a lottery on top of that, so there's no guarantee you will get issued a license.
So I think John hit a good spot, and I think that's where we need to kind of start wrapping this one, and that is check with our attorney and make sure that we can, like, do an amendment, like what you were, like you proposed.
Right.
And see if, because we have councilmen up here that don't even, and vice mayor that don't even recognize, cultivate, and it's like, kind of like one of those things that just kind of creeped on them, it sounds like, you know, and so, you know, we need to, you know, because I'm sure, I don't know, I figured they would be the same way we are today, is like, man, I don't want it cultivated, you know, or whatever. So I think it's something that we should definitely hit and see if we can amend that.
Right.
I know that that might put us behind the 8 ball as far as that, but if we could at least adopt a restriction, or we can adopt that we would allow the one more cell here and not stop that as we move forward to the amendment of this. I think that's a great, are you guys okay with that, sending that out?
And so the gist I'm getting is we're looking at dispensary only is where we would like to go, right?
You guys, I'm in favor of that. Aren't, seriously, I mean.
Because as you can tell, there's a lot of, that is still unknown. So I
Right,
mean,
there
the whole
really
goal
is.
of this was to not come to you with some kind of document that was put together like Thatcher did, in which case they just table it and they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
So the idea here was to be very preliminary and just get a sense. Do we want to cultivate, manufacture? Do we want a dispensary? So I'm getting the idea that we want a dispensary, and one of the things we want to look at, given the equity in terms of the provisions for both types, if we can kind of repeal back on the medical and then also eliminate cultivating there, and as well as with the recreation.
Yes, try to, I
Okay.
just, because, I mean, some of this isn't, I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm the only one that lives by dead people, and so, I mean, it affects me, but, I mean, I shouldn't say that, I'm sorry, it don't affect me. But there's other people that it could affect, you know, and so, as far as cultivating and stuff. I think it'd be fun to play hide and seek in a marijuana field.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that
No, you wouldn't get hurt, you got lost.
potentially to add what you have on the screen before you, a single retail location where marijuana and marijuana products can be sold to consumers under the adult use. It sounds like that's the thing that you're looking at, and nothing beyond that.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, if the current dispensary makes an application for the recreational and is awarded that, that would be it, right? No.
No, it'd be a
Another
second.
location.
And, so they could add an additional.
Right.
They could add, you know, a dual license,
I see.
basically.
It wouldn't
Right.
take up the one license for,
I'm
county.
not sure. I'm
They
not
need
sure
the
about
two
that
license.
either.
Ms. Fisher is nodding that we would still have one more license.
The dual location, the retail site will be co-located in one spot
Right.
if they apply for that. And then you'll have a availability
Right.
for a back county retail license.
Okay, thank you.
I think this is some great information and great discussion. You guys got enough to go forward?
I think we do.
Yeah, and then we can even, you know, look at this, do the comparisons, and start moving forward with the text amendment to add marijuana and marijuana products, that they can be sold to consumers. And let me ask you just another question while we're moving through this. Do you wish to follow the same distancing requirements in the C2 zone that we currently have for a medical marijuana dispensary?
I do, I would like
think
to,
so.
I'd have liked to seen it expand, but yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
The same distancing requirements? Okay.
Yeah, I just am not big on the cultivating and the manufacturing. I'm okay with them opening it up and bringing it in and selling it, and, getting us 2.5% sales tax. I think if they would've got off the highway, I think they'd be flooded with people, but they're still pretty flooded, so. Anybody else?
So what do you think we agreeing to here? Because sometimes we
Okay.
walk away and not everybody understands what we're agreeing to or think we're agreeing to or going forward with.
Susan, will you go ahead and repeat what you feel
So
like you can?
sure, my understanding is that we would move forward with processing a text amendment to allow adult use dispensaries that would sell marijuana and marijuana products. And that we would allow that in the C2 zone, and we would apply the same distancing requirements that we do to medical marijuana dispensaries.
So
And
you-
then we'll look at cultivation as a separate issue.
So you want to recoup the tax, but you don't want to have anything to do with the cultivation,
Correct,
okay?
correct.
But we may also have to
Might have to be
amend
stuck
our
with it, yeah.
current
We have
Right. And we'll find out
ordinance
if
to
we can.
remove the cultivating from the
cultivation from the
medical.
medical and, yes.
You have to see if that's even possible.
Right, because I think it becomes a timing issue, right, with the way that the licenses are issued.
Yeah, and right now, they're not gonna make the first round, because of the way we have to process a text amendment in our codes, it's not gonna make the March 9th deadline date, so it'll be the second round, the social equity licenses.
Ms. Fish is shaking her head no on something.
I think they get to go with whatever rule we have in the place at the time.
There's an option on the form that's posted on DHS website that there are no local zoning restriction for the proposed marijuana establishment. So they're giving you the option, you could, I know DHS probably doesn't want attachments, but you could attach what your current medical requirements are and, say that there's been council discussion that they'll match it. But right now you don't have since it can't be more restrictive than the current medical, if they're within the medical, then they're gonna be in the zone.
Right, I think our discussion isn't so much on the zoning as the use.
Right.
So we're talking about whether, if we were to take the medical and remove the ability to cultivate at all, regardless of zoning, that would then be applicable to recreational.
Correct. It does say not more restrictive then, so I think you're gonna have to work on that with your, city attorney. And
You just have to hire a really good attorney, right?
Just keep going until they say no.
Remember, an attorney is only as good as the other attorney, right?
As much money as you have to spend.
I'm still
No, but I think
curious,
we've got some
I'm
pretty
still
good
curious
rules
about
already in
you.
place, really.
Yeah.
I
who
think-
you represent again?
I work with a number of cannabis clients, and I work on the regulation and lobbying at the state level. In this particular circumstance, I represent Divine Holdings. They are interested in looking at some of these back county licenses, and we think that it is a huge benefit to help educate the local jurisdictions about what Prop 207 has, the rules DHS is coming out on, to help prepare when the applications come out that these forms are going to be coming your way. We only want legitimate people that are following the rules to get sign off on the forms and to make sure the process is appropriate and that everyone knows what's going on. So I feel in a very fortunate situation that, my client has empowered me to get out and help and educate and be a resource.
Okay.
That's what I was wanting to know, what benefit it was to you.
Yeah.
So Tammy, forget the nuts, bring me brownies.
Yes. Councilman McGoy, did
So-
you have anything to add to it, or?
I think we actually have pretty good rules in place, and if we did nothing, I think we'd be okay, truthfully. I mean, I know you don't want that smell up there by your house, but I don't think it's not economically feasible for that to happen. They're gonna find somebody's old hog farm 20 miles from town, and they're gonna put it there.
I would still ask for my benefit.
Yeah, I think we're in investigative mode anyway, because I think everybody's in the same boat right now. We're all kind of learning as we go, and the state is writing guidelines, so I think we'll get more information as we go forward.
Exactly. Everything's subject to.
So, yeah, whatever they decide to do up there.
Yeah, so I think we've got a good place to start.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Very informative from everybody. Parklets, John.
All right, well, the parklet issue, I mean, originally we had actually done a lot of work. My predecessor had made a couple of presentations to council regarding the introduction of parklets into basically the downtown and using some of the parking spaces. And he had contacted essentially 5 establishments, 3 of which had indicated an immediate interest in doing this. In talking with the mayor, I think we wanted to have more discussion as to, is this something that we really want to move forward with? We went forward, we worked on a policy that basically governed the installation, the management, and the fees associated with parklets. And so, at this point, the original idea was that it was gonna be an additional economic development tool, right? As we, kind of dovetail with the entertainment district that we put into place, that, the new wave really sweeping up in the valley is this, extension of premises, right? A lot of it's driven by COVID, but our design was essentially to make it be something more than that, something permanent. Obviously, in the downtown, we have some issues with parking, and again, not every establishment may get a parklet or want a parklet, and that may have an impact on other businesses in the downtown. So parking, I think, would be a significant issue, and it's something that I think actually came up during our preliminary discussions. And then the other thing I wanted to point out as an extension of that, we had talked at a work session a few months ago about acquiring some property from the Chase Bank, and basically turning that property into a parking lot potentially. So we did get an appraisal of the property. We did submit to them the number that the appraiser gave us for that property. We've contacted them a couple times, and so we haven't heard back from them, but we understand that it is in the pipeline and it is being discussed. So again, just in terms of where we are, I mean, we've got documents and policies in place to go forward, but based on the feedback I'm getting, I'm not so sure that that's necessarily where the council wants to go. So again, we're here with direction on parklets in the downtown area and whether or not we want to proceed with putting them there or not.
John and I do appreciate you bringing this to, just for another additional work session, just so that it didn't just get shut down or whatever. But I believe because parking is so tight on Main Street, and I'm just, utilizing different areas and stuff, and it seems like a lot of the restaurant areas more down this further side by Chase Bank, and I just feel like allowing parklets takes out 2 parking per restaurant. Then that would be a possibility of 4. And a lot of times, some of your elderlies use those parking spots to, to be able to get closer to, and I think there's only 1 or 2 that it would affect. But anyway, I just think that we need to maintain our parking on Main Street. But I do think we have a beautiful area and I've noticed that, and that two companies right now have little chairs and little tables outside. That looks really cool, and yet the traffic still flows, meaning the flow of foot traffic still flows, and people can sit out there, and it's just 2 per table. And I think that that's, to me, fine enough to accommodate. And as we saw on our report, that a lot of our restaurants, even during COVID, even though we're still in COVID, but yet has flourished still. I mean, so I don't know that the parklets are a thing that we really need at this time, but definitely not penalize a business that already has a little table and chairs out there. I think that's really, I like that setting. That's why we had trees. That's why we expanded a little bit of the stuff. So I think it's really neat setting. That's just my point. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I would like to keep on looking into it, because I think it was one thing, it's always been a problem. There's more parking than people think if the employees and different, that's enforced. So many people park there, it's for customers. Maybe we could look at, more in the back part of the businesses. Look there for additional parking, like say where with trophies and teas, places like that. Take a look at kind of opening it up. To me, the parklets enhance the Main Street. You know, it encourages more walking traffic, you know. I've walked Main Street and that. It'd be nice to be able to sit outside, you know, and sit there a while, look around, do some shopping. But then I think what would go along with that too, though, is that the businesses should somehow synchronize their hours, especially on a weekend when, you know, nothing happens overnight. You don't build your traffic overnight. I found that out in, you know, 46 years in retail. But, you know, get a vision, start working together, and you could make, Main Street could be more. I like that idea myself. Done right, get the right size, you know. So I'd like to see it, you know, keep looking at it.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I just had a question. I was kind of under the impression, and I don't know why, that the parklets would be tied mainly to restaurant traffic. Is that correct?
For the most part, although we did try to expand the language a little bit, so if you look at something like the venue, where they wouldn't be necessarily cooking their own food, but they may host, let's say, a wedding reception or something, we wanted to at least have it in, tying it into the service of food or beverages, but not necessarily generated within the establishment themselves. So for the most part, it is tied to that, but not necessarily just restaurants. Just in case another establishment like the venue would want to make use of it, they wouldn't if we only address restaurants, then they wouldn't be eligible, and they may be a good candidate.
Okay, but as the vice mayor mentioned, people who are just downtown shopping, would they have the ability to just go sit at one and take,
Sure.
take space up?
Yes. But it would be in connection with that establishment, because the parklet would be connected to a particular business.
Who's got the insurance on them?
They do, and we do as well, so there's two different pieces to the insurance.
I'd be suing the city, they got more money.
Well, we have our basic indemnity plan, like if somebody drives into it, but there's other issues, like if they were to spill coffee on somebody, so they still have to provide insurance in addition to what we have.
Councilman Lopez?
I don't necessarily want it to die on the vine, but I don't think the timing for it is right now either. I don't know how much the business is willing to put into it at this time. Like you said, our sales tax, they're holding their own. And, I'd like to see it, but I'm waiting for a different atmosphere in the world.
Has the Downtown Association shown any interest in this at all? Have they
You know, my
chimed in?
understanding is that no one ever went to them, so I talked to Susan, and our plan is to go to them and sit down and discuss what we're doing with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah,
I would like to hear from them. I mean, they're an organization, they represent a lot of businesses down there, and they should
Right.
definitely be chiming in on something like this.
Yeah, we don't know how much they're willing to contribute, cooperate, or what.
And could they even use the city of Safford's facade grants? Can they use that to help, because that's the facade, could they use that grant money to help with the parklet and stuff? I mean, you know,
And
there's-
they were gonna do it in a portable, temporary manner at first to look how it was, where they could recoup it in the evening and stuff. I don't think they've even tested that yet.
Well, that aspect of it would simply be whatever tables, chairs, umbrellas, that's what would be, if you're referring to what they take in at night,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be the parklet itself, it would just be the accoutrements basically that
Yeah,
they
well-
use on them.
It's gonna be made into a nice thing eventually, but even the venue, they could have a special permit where they could do something right there in front of theirs and just
Right.
see what it's like.
And they were
allow-
one of the original five, although they're on hold, there were five that showed initial interest, I think 3 that are out there. And then actually the state, because this has become an issue in the valley, this extension of premises with COVID, they actually have granting programs. I know of one establishment downtown that applied for money from the state, and I think they can get as much as $10,000 toward working with this. So one of the things we built into this, and of course we'd have to work on agreements with them on an individual basis, because they would have to turn it over to us, and then we could probably waive the fee for a number of years. But there are grant monies out there right now, and they've just refunded that. So I think they went through a whole $1 million already at the state, and they refunded the program. So there is the potential that they could get external funds to help pay for the construction.
You know, I think, John, too, if, you know, this does pick up some more momentum, I think that you need to have presented to the council what it would look like. Because I want, if we're gonna do something like this, all parklets should match.
Let me,
regardless. You know, like, you can't just come out there and throw plywood out there with 2x4s.
Right.
And, you know, everything needs to match. Either we say, hey, if you do this and you agree to it, it's gonna be, you know, brick to match the brick that we have. You know, and we gotta make sure we have the drainage pipes underneath that to where we're not causing pondage. You know, cause a lot of those parklets, if they choose, like, for instance, one of the companies that is in a corner, you know, we can't block the grate there that drains anything into it. So, you know, I think it needs to be all uniform and all, you know, of a design that we agree with, that says, here you go.
so I got a couple of pictures here that Lance was kind enough to provide. So this right here would be, obviously this is Genevieve's as a CAD drawing, but you can see here in front, you can see the parklet where it would take up those spaces. These are, I think, 10 by 30, I believe, is the spec. And so you can see, again, here's kind of the standard that we were looking at. We did go out to a vendor and ask them to give us an idea what, you know, putting something like this in would be. So the idea would be indeed to try to standardize the look, so you wouldn't have this hodgepodge going on. And again, these are, what, 30 by 10, basically. So basically, 2 parking spaces, I think, the gist of why they did it that way, so it would look something like that.
And if they serve beer, can beer pass out the door into one of those facades?
Yes.
They can.
Yeah, and that's part of the policy. So you have to have a liquor license, as, you know, if you were serving inside, but it would allow them to serve out on the patios. But only there for seated customers, so you couldn't be milling about, being on the sidewalk, you'd have to be on the actual parklet itself.
Mayor, they would actually have to go back to the liquor board and get what is called an extension of premises to allow, you know,
And
to
then
allow
that
them to
would
serve
come
alcohol.
back to us as well?
Correct.
To approve that kind of stuff? That's what, because I mean, that's pretty iffy when you're, you know, outside facilities. It needs to, okay, so they'd have
Yeah,
to do, they'd
yeah,
have
they
to
would have
quite
to
a
apply
bit as
for
well.
that.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
And everybody would be allowed to use it, just like the park.
Well, you should be able to, because it's a public facility, even though you as the owner, you paid for all that. The city's not paying for that.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't be a public use thing, it would be
See,
associated
so
with a
that's what
particular
Councilman
business.
Seal was asking, and it just kinda got washed through. So that's the thing, is if I own a company and I built one of those, no, I don't want you coming and taking a break on my thing, because I'm using that for a customer. So I'd have to run
Right.
you off.
So the loitering part is.
It'd have to say no
addressed.
loitering, right? I mean, so that was, you know, I think that was what,
Right.
Councilman
Yeah.
Seal, is that what you were
Yeah.
asking?
Right, and
You
there's a
couldn't just come and
fee.
prop yourself there.
So if you got this, you would, as the business, you would pay a fee for it, an annual fee based on the square footage. So you're literally paying for the privilege of having it there, it's not free.
And you're also paying for the construction, not the city at all.
No, the city would be paying for it unless they had some source of external funds. And again, this was the way this thing was put forward in the beginning, so that's the way it's being brought forward.
I think it
now.
should be them, because, I mean, we just showed in a sales tax report that we're only getting $115,000 from downtown Main Street. A couple of those are gonna take $115,000, so we need to really, if we're looking at this, I think we rent them the spots, or we take away the 2 spots and we say, you construct that, here's the construction details that we said, and Jaime's going to be inspecting it and make sure it's done according to our
Right, it will-
drawings.
all that will happen, although, I think, is Lance still here? The cost is not that, I think it was, what, 60,000 for 5 of them total, or 67,000?
We went out and got quotes, based on these plans. It was roughly, we bid it by the square foot, because we didn't know what sizes, we just assumed 10 by 30 at the 5 businesses, so we had a square foot price, and it was $12,000 to $13,000 per spot. It was $67,500 for 5 of them, So that
Now,
come
when
up
you
to
say you went
12.
out to bid, did you go out to bid for a company, or did you go out to bid for
We-
materials and you're going to build them?
We reached out to four vendors for an actual quote to build them based on our specs. Not us build them, not, it would be the city paying for them build them. That's the way we went out to it. That's the way it was brought up, like manager said, it was brought to us to put it out that way. And that's been some time ago.
Go ahead, Gene.
Yeah, I remember the figure that Horatio had talked about was $10,000 to $15,000 per unit. But I think going to the downtown association is probably the first thing we ought to do, because the restaurants are a very important part of our city. But there are other entities that are as important to them. They're important to them, and I think that we need to have the downtown association weigh in, because it is gonna take away some parking. When we're out looking for parking, and then we're gonna take away parking at the same time. So I think, since the downtown association represents not only restaurants, but every other business there on Main Street, that they need to be
Chime back in.
sounding off on.
Yeah, and I think ideally, we would have gone there as part of this discussion, but we can do that.
Yeah, I just think it's a really great concept. I love everything about it, but at the same time, I just know that our parking on Main Street is so tight. And I don't care what anybody says. You drive around the block until you find a freaking parking spot. You don't park in the facility that was made for parking down here, by ADOT. I mean, very limited people park there, so they drive around. So we've gotta listen to all of the businesses, and I think that's a great opportunity to have them chime in, and so, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and see, what's really interesting is there's a lot of stuff that's happening down that area, when we have 4 buildings on Main Street that is operating out of the art facility, and then you have others. I mean, so we're just so mixed down on Main Street that it's almost like we're tail end heavy with the flow, and that's the area that, I mean, you've got the El Coronado, you've got Genevieve's. So that's 4 spots right out the gate, and then that would then say if Graham County Florist was in, or whoever would, them selling that building, they just took 4 spots in front of their building, gone. So we, as a whole, we need to think of all of the vendors, not just the restaurants. We need to be participating in all of the vendors. You have the venue, you also have the movie theater that's getting ready to be back on construction, that's supposed to open up in 2021. So you've got a lot of stuff happening down there that we should, as a city, be looking for parking if we're going to be doing this and stuff, because it's really interesting. It really is. I like the concept, but I don't like losing parking. I remember as a little kid going and putting the nickels in the meters that was on Main Street. And I remember them getting rid of the meters and stuff, and, and Main Street is so interesting, and it's so full of history, and we need to preserve that as much as possible before we start losing it all.
Bottom line is we have to get in touch with the main downtown association, let them get the ball going. It's up to them, it's not up to us to decide. If they say they want us to go ahead, well, let's do it. They may say the parking's more important, leave it the way it is. They're the ones that have the answer,
The one thing I would just say, again, because I think all the points that are being made are good points and they're valid. We just recently went through this process where we put this entertainment district in.
Right.
And so we do have some new things coming online and everything, so I would recommend or suggest just to think a little bit outside the box. Again, obviously, we're dealing with a lot of vendors, we're taking up spaces, but if we think about the entertainment district, having put that boundary down there and having declared this an entertainment district, what can we do to actually make it be something other than what it is right now? Because we're really not going forward too much, and things like this may be incremental steps going forward to kind of change that dynamic downtown, to try to get us moving in that direction, that we're trying something different. And again, I realize that you know, there are a lot of interest down there, and so this may not be the right thing to do, but at least, let's at least give it a shake, and we'll go to the Downtown Association, talk with them, and then we'll come back with whatever kind of recommendations they have, and we can go from there.
I think that's where we should be. Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
We'll stay here.